Hello guys, welcome back. My name is Nathan and today I'm going to be making my post-trade deadline 2021 NHL playoff predictions and Stanley Cup winner picks. Now with the trade deadline over and done with, a lot of the contenders have pretty much changed the style and changed the look of their teams, and I think we'll see some major movement in terms of the standings in these next couple of months. So when it comes to the standings for this year's NHL playoffs, who will be the teams that I think make this year's playoffs, and who do I see as the team that will win the Stanley Cup this season? Watch till the end for all of my season picks and my Stanley Cup winners as well. And make sure you hit that subscribe button for more hockey videos just like this one. 65% of the people that are watching the videos are not subscribed, so every bit helps now on the road to 34K. So how today's video is going to work is that we're going to go through each and every single NHL division, going for the top 4 spots in each division as well, seeing who will miss the playoffs, seeing who will make the playoffs, and then we're going to go into the full playoffs, seeing who ends up winning each series, and then who will eventually win the 2021 Stanley Cup. So, without further ado, let's get into it with the East, the North, the West, and the Central in order. And starting with the East division, coming in at number 1, I see the Washington Capitals finishing with 80 points on the year. Now, when it comes to this East division, there's really only one spot that I think is truly up for grabs, and that is the number 4 spot. But at number 1, I see the Washington Capitals keeping on to that lead and having a great second half, still being a strong team and likely will be a great team in the playoffs too. Then going on to the second spot though in the East, and this one also I think will be pretty highly contested, but I think the Pittsburgh Penguins will end up finishing at number 2, going from 3rd to 2nd at the moment. I think they'll finish with 77 points. I think it will be a pretty close race to number 1, but I think the Washington Capitals will eventually overcome that. And then at number 3, I have finally the New York Islanders. I see them being right behind the Pittsburgh Penguins in that tire race, and again, that seeding does matter, and I think for the Pittsburgh Penguins, they'll end up finishing with 77 points. I think the Islanders will end up finishing with just under that at 76, still being a super strong team and among the best points-wise in the league. And then going on to the number 4 spot, which again, I think is the most competitive one right now in terms of the number 4 spots, besides, I would say, the West in the league right now. It's between the Boston Bruins and the New York Rangers, and the Rangers have made up some ground recently. The Boston Bruins still do have some games in hand, though, and I think that will affect things. But going into the end of the season, I see it being a race between just a couple of points, maybe 2 points in the most. But I do feel like the Boston Bruins will get that number 4 spot, finishing with 72 points. I could see the Rangers being around 68, 69 potentially if they continued to get down this winning way, but I see the Boston Bruins eventually getting there. They're the better team right now, and I think once they get a little more healthy, they'll run away with it just a tiny bit. The Rangers will still be a decent position in terms of points, but unfortunately, will just miss the playoffs. But now going on to the North Division, and this also is one of the most highly competitive divisions in the NHL, but when it comes to the top 4 spots in the North, it's a little bit sealed at this point, unless the Calgary Flames make a humongous run or somehow the Vancouver Canucks come up from this situation they've been in. I really see the top 4 in the North sticking as how it is. Maybe not in terms of placement, but in terms of the top 4 teams in the North. But that doesn't mean that the race will still be pretty competitive. I think for the number 1 spot, though, in the North, it'll be pretty set in stone, and that'll be for the Toronto Maple Leafs to capture. I think they'll finish with 82 points on the year, have just a pretty decent last couple of weeks for the season. But now going on to number 2 and number 3 in the North, and this is where I think it gets really interesting, because in my opinion, it'll be between the Oilers and the Winnipeg Jets, and right now I think they're tied in points and pretty much of the same games played. These are 2 teams that I think are pretty close, at least regular season-wise so far this year, and I can see it going to either one, but at number 2, I'm going to go with the Edmonton Oilers. The main reason I do this is because I think the Kulikov addition is really good for them, but also I think their just schedule in general is a lot easier. With Winnipeg, they're playing Edmonton a lot, but when they're not playing Edmonton, it's usually against teams like Montreal and against teams like Toronto. Meanwhile, for the Oilers, if they're not playing the Jets, they're playing a bunch of teams like the Calgary Flames and the Vancouver Canucks. And then for the Winnipeg Jets, they'll finish with 74, right behind them, still having a good solid end to the season, and will likely be one of the better playoff teams in the North Division for sure. Then going on to number 4, not really too much of a surprise, we're going to go to the Montreal Canadiens. I see them finishing with 66 points in the year, just having a decent second half to the year. They haven't really been great in these past couple of weeks, but I think they will kind of turn the page a little bit. I'm not really sure how much playoff success they'll get, but I think that number 4 spot is pretty much about as much set in stone as you could possibly get. But now going on to the West Division, and this probably is a division with the most potential races in it right now. Sadly, this year we don't really see too many races for those final spots in the divisions, but I think the West is a little bit different. Now we're going to start out with number 1 in the West, and it's not really a surprise that the Colorado Avalanche will finish at number 1. I think they'll finish with 85 points on the year, winning the President's Trophy, and being a team that just continues to absolutely roll past everybody and get their way. But now going on to number 2, we're going to go to a team that's no slouch themselves at the Vegas Golden Knights. I see them finishing with 80 points on the year, and that would easily be the best second place team in the entire league. I think they'll continue to be fantastic. This is a team, though, that if the Colorado Avalanche were not a thing in their division, they would be running away with the division like they have in the past. But the Golden Knights are the Golden Knights. We know who they are. They're still a solid team. They're still amazing, and that's just how Vegas is. Now going on to number 3 spot in the West, and this is where it gets really interesting in my opinion. I'm still going to stick with the Minnesota Wild at number 3, but I think there is an argument to be made that maybe the St. Louis Blues do catch them. But I'm really hoping the Wild are able to stick to that spot, and I think they will with 72 points in the year. They've been a little bit of a slump, I guess, recently, but this is still a team that has been really good on paper, really good chemistry this year, and I still think they'll find a way to get at least a playoff position. I don't really see them choking that away. But now, to basically the obvious pick, there is a little bit of a race, or at least there has been recently. But if we're being honest, especially the Coyotes losing 4 straight, and the San Jose Sharks I think losing 2 straight, and the St. Louis Blues winning 3 straight, I think the momentum is on the St. Louis Blues side. And even if it was just an even playing field, if I'm taking any team out of those 3 to make the playoffs, it's easily the St. Louis Blues, and I think they will capture that. I think they'll be 1 point behind the Minnesota Wild at 72, or 71, but will still be among one of the better teams in the league, and especially in the second half, one of the hottest teams as well, which considering back to 2019 is really not a surprise for this franchise. But now going on to the Central Division and the top 4 spots, I'm going to start out with the Carolina Hurricanes at the number 1. There's really a pretty interesting race for that number 1 spot, I think, between the Hurricanes, the Lightning, and the Florida Panthers. But I do think the Hurricanes are going to end up winning this. They've been 6-3-1, I think, in their last 10. They've been just a solid team overall this year, and I really don't see them being close to outside of playoff position. They'll be in the playoffs for sure, and I think number 1 is where they'll sit with 77 points. Going on to number 2, though, just behind Carolina, I'm going to have the Florida Panthers at 76 points. I think the Panthers will be the main contender, I guess, for the Hurricanes in the number 1 spot. But still, I think the Panthers will have a great second half of this year officially. And although I don't really see them going too far in the playoffs, I still see this team as a great regular season team, and a team that, even with Aaron Ekblad gone, will still have some pretty good success. And then going on to number 3, and the Tampa Bay Lightning at 75 points, just behind the Florida Panthers. I'm not really sure what's going on with the Lightning right now. I mean, Andrei Vasilevsky has been a little bit more human. The defense has also not been the greatest. Just a little bit of a combination of everything. Just not really going their way recently, and they've kind of had a little bit of a skid, which they're still in the playoff race for that number 1 spot, considering that, and I think that's a pretty good accomplishment. But I think for Tampa, they'll skid for a little bit longer. Still be a team, though, that come playoff time is the Tampa Bay Lightning that we all know. And I think they will finish with 75 points in the year. And then going on to the 4th spot in the Central, another interesting race that I think will probably go as expected. I have at number 4 the Nashville Predators. I think they'll finish with 65 points in the year, just be a decent team. They'll have the least amount of points of any playoff team I see, but I still see them finishing with 65 and ending up in that 4th spot. I think Chicago and Dallas are the only real competitors, but honestly, besides even Dallas, Chicago is really the only one that's been playing well recently, in my opinion. But I think the Nashville Predators, of how good they've been this last month, will carry that momentum and still be a good team. Playoff-wise, I'm not really too convinced, but hey, at least in the last month or so, they've been fantastic. But now we can go on to our second round of winners who will advance on to the conference finals. And I'm going to start out today with the Capitals versus the Islanders. And this is going to be an absolute brawl. I think it'll go all the way, all the distance to 7 games. But even though I do like the Islanders' chances playoff-wise, there's something different I think about this Washington Capitals team that I haven't quite seen since 2018. The defense still has been a little bit suspect, but I think in terms of just how good they played overall as a whole, and especially when it comes to that offensive chemistry and the goaltending that's been as good as it has so far this year, I think the Washington Capitals will end up winning this series in 7 and advancing on to the conference finals. Next up, though, we have the second round matchup in the North Division between the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Winnipeg Jets. In my opinion, these are the top two teams in the playoffs in the North Division, and I think these two teams will eventually meet together. It's no surprise that they'll be battling it out for who goes on to be the winner of the North Division. And I kind of see this series going on, at least in terms of the scores and the actual games themselves, kind of looking a little bit similar to the Leafs and Cap series in 2018, where it was relatively short, but we saw so many overtimes and so many one-goal games, it was kind of ridiculous. But even in the end, I think the Leafs will end up winning the series in 5. It'll look like a more commanding victory than it is, but I think there'll be a lot of close games that the Toronto Maple Leafs will just end up winning. Now going on to the Avalanche versus the Golden Knights for our next series. This one, of course, facing off as the West Division Brawl. This is another series that I see going 7 games, probably between two of the top 5 teams in the NHL right now, the Avalanche and the Golden Knights. But if the Avalanche stay healthy, which is obviously the big thing that they did not have in the years prior, if they're able to stay healthy, I think this is an Avalanche team that's hard to beat, even against a team like the Vegas Golden Knights. I think the Avs will end up winning in 7 and advancing on to the conference final, looking for absolute blood. Then going on to the next matchup between the Hurricanes and the Lightning, another just amazing matchup in this second round, and I think this is a pretty balanced matchup in terms of what we've seen so far this year, especially if the Lightning continue kind of their skid right now. I'm not really sure who I'd exactly go for, and I think momentum plays a big factor in playoffs, especially when it comes to this year in terms of health and in terms of the playoffs, really starting right after the regular season. And I think in the end, it'll go 7 games once again, but I think the Carolina Hurricanes will win the series. It'll be an amazing one between two amazing teams, but I think this is the year for the Canes to at least get to the conference finals and have some pretty big success there. And then on to the conference finals between the top 4 teams left in the playoffs. We have the Washington Capitals and the Toronto Maple Leafs next up. This is, of course, a rematch of that 2018 series, which I think left some bad blood for both teams involved. I think this is going to be an amazing matchup. Another matchup, too, that I think could go 7 games. I think it'll go 6. And even though I think the Toronto Maple Leafs have done well this year, and I think they will do well in the playoffs, they'll get to the conference finals, and I think that's a major success for them. Again, I think there's something different about this Washington Capitals team, especially if Samsonov can really get healthy and really get back to the level that we saw last year. I think the goaltending really is a huge factor for Washington, and I think it will go in their favor in this year's playoffs. And I think they'll have some relatively low effort matchups. I think Toronto, in terms of who they could face, I mean, compared to teams like the Avalanche, I think it's on the lesser side of things, especially come playoff time. I think the Washington Capitals will end up winning the series in 6 and going on to the Stanley Cup final for the first time since 2018. And then you have the next matchup versus the Carolina Hurricanes and the Colorado Avalanche. I went back and forth on this, man. So many different options here. But back in the preseason, I predicted the Colorado Avalanche to win the Stanley Cup and to go all the way, and especially in a series like this, even though I like the Hurricanes a lot this year, I think they have a great chance, I still think the goaltending will hold them back. They might get to a great round because of it, but I still think they need a true bona fide healthy starter, and they don't quite have that like the Colorado Avalanche do. I think the Avalanche will have their way against the Carolina Hurricanes and will end up winning in 6 games, setting up a Stanley Cup final of the Colorado Avalanche and the Washington Capitals in the 2021 NHL playoffs. So, we're finally here. To the Stanley Cup final goes the Washington Capitals and the Colorado Avalanche, arguably 2, maybe top 3 teams in the NHL so far this year. And these are amazing matchups, I think, and amazing storylines. Colorado is looking for their first cup of this core that arguably could get multiple throughout the next few years. Washington's more on the other side of things, where they're trying to get that last cup, or at least one other cup for Ovechkin, for Backstrom, trying to go for it, and trying to get as much as humanly possible, especially with Ovechkin being a free agent after this year. They're going to go absolutely all in for especially that core, and I think for the Washington Capitals, they'll still have a fantastic season. Same thing with the Colorado Avalanche, who obviously make the Stanley Cup final. Pretty hard to do if you haven't noticed already. But in this series, even though I think this is a pretty balanced one, and in terms of play this year, I think it's a pretty balanced one, For the 2021 Stanley Cup Final and the 2021 Stanley Cup winner, I see the Colorado Avalanche, Nathan MacKinnon, and the whole core there getting their first Stanley Cup and winning the 2021 Stanley Cup Final. I see the Washington Capitals doing great in this series though, but I do think the Avalanche will end up winning in 5. Kind of like how the Golden Knights and Caps series went back in 2018, where again there was just quite a few close games in there where you could tell the Golden Knights were trying to obviously win the Stanley Cup because they were in the Stanley Cup Final, but the Washington Capitals just had their way in that series. I think the Avalanche will kind of be in the same position where I think they'll just overpower the Washington Capitals in the end, win in 5, and win the 2021 Stanley Cup. Finally. And hey, as a Dallas Stars fan, you know I'm not biased, but for Avs fans, if you don't win the Cup this year, can we just have your team? I would appreciate that. You can hand them over after if you don't win this year. We'll make a deal, don't worry. Anyways, thanks so much for watching, y'all. If you enjoyed, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell. Make sure you comment down below what you agree and disagree with my picks and predictions, and who do you see winning the 2021 Stanley Cup. Let me know all your thoughts in the comments down below, and let me know all your cup predictions too. Make sure you share this video with your friends, get it out there, y'all, and click on this card for all of my predictions and picks videos. Oh my gosh, I went completely wide, more than I'm already. Right in one playlist. My name is Nathan, and I'll see you in the next video or stream. Goodbye.